think the mood's about to change. I brought my buddy Steve with me here so I could talk right to him. You got my pictures down there, JoJo? Yeah. Bring those up. I may need those too. Thank you. I'm so glad that Steve chose celebration of life as his theme today, because I think his life was a celebration of life. And so I thought this was so fitting. So I ran the MBA program that Steve was a part of. And the first time I met Steve, he comes into my office, and he's sitting about 5 feet away from me. And he comes at me with this booming voice. And I'm like, dude, you don't have to yell at me. And he's like, I can't help it, Doc. I'm so glad to be here. And that was kind of the theme for the rest of our time together. I said, okay, just keep booming. And he kept booming. And he kept being glad to be here. And it was one big love fest between me and Steve and the professional MBA program. So I'm going to put Steve down for a second while I share some other pictures. Stay right there. So I'm going to tell some of my favorite Steve moments from the MBA program. And I see some of his MBA brothers and sisters out there. So if you guys have good MBA stories you want to tell, scream them out. Let's see. Oh, you saw this one. This was Steve chilling on the rocks in Chile. Chilling on the rocks in Chile. So one of my favorite features of Steve was the fact that he was the most expressive guy I had ever met. I mean, you could tell exactly what he was thinking at all times, and that was terrific. So, let's see. This was the moment where you could tell that he didn't believe what the professor was saying. So a debate was about to start, which was fine. And it was cool, and he gave everybody a heads up. You could tell it was coming. And this was the gotcha face right here. This was the gotcha face. One of the funniest Steve moments was when one of the professors could come in and she could meet everybody in the class and memorize their names, and she could do it in the first 5 minutes. So she'd go around the room, and Steve and Mitch Stockdale, are you here? Is Mitch here? So Steve and Mitch are sitting next to each other, and she would learn a couple names, and then she would go back through and get everybody. And Mitch and Steve decided that they were going to try to fool her. So every time they came back around, they changed something about themselves. They changed seats. They swapped hats. They changed glasses. It was the funniest thing. And she finally figured out what was going on. And here was Steve throwing Mitch under the bus with a little, his fault, not mine, his plan, not mine, which was wonderful. And Steve Gordon and the Hanlons down here in the corner, Steve making goo-goo eyes at Karen Hanlon, and Don being perfectly okay with the whole thing. I don't know why you weren't more threatened, Don. You should have been more threatened by the whole thing. Great stuff. Honey, let's see. I'll just put that. Well, I don't want to drop anybody else's, knock anybody else's stuff out of the way. So Steve was the perfect MBA student. And it's not because his grades were perfect. It was because he had the best perspective of any student ever. So I just say, Steve Gordon. Oh, the dog ate my homework. Steve Gordon. Oh, I got a flat tire. Steve Gordon, which means just shut up and be here like Steve Gordon was. Steve Gordon was all in all the time, and it was a pleasure to be around him. And I talked to him on Sunday. And and again, he wanted to talk about the impact that the MBA had on him. And I was like, dude, let me tell you about the impact you had on the MBA program and everybody you touched. So I just want to close by saying, Steve, we love you, and we are grateful for the time we had with you. And I will finish with one of my favorite quotes from the great philosopher Dr. Seuss, who says, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. We can all smile because of our association with Mr. Steve Gordon. Thank you.